Welcome to the Ordinary Doula Podcast with Angie Rosier, hosted by Birth Learning, where we help prepare folks for labor and birth with expertise coming from 20 years of experience in a busy doula practice, helping thousands of people prepare for labor, providing essential knowledge and tools for positive and empowering birth experiences.
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Doula Podcast, hosted by Birth Learning. My name is Angie Rosier and I'm your host. So today I want to talk about ROMs, and that is kind of an acronym, ROM, which means rupture of membranes. Another way to say that is the water breaking. So I have a mentor in my life who is so amazing, and she taught me some better words for things that just feel more gentle. So while the medical term is rupture of membranes or water breaking, I like to use the term release of membranes. So rupture and break kind of sound like harsh words. Like if something's ruptured, that sounds kind of explosive and scary maybe. If something's broken, well, it sounds broken. So I prefer the word release. The water releases itself, right? Or it is released by someone or something. So we're going to talk about that. And while ROM means rupture of membranes, we'll be referring to release of membranes. There are different terms. Maybe you've had a baby or you're going to have a baby, and you'll hear a lot of shop talk, if you will, during labor and delivery. And I think it's helpful if you understand what it is they're talking about. And ROM could be one of them. So the membranes can release at any time, right? You see that in the movies all the time. The water breaks, usually the person's in a public place like the grocery store, and the baby comes right away. That's Hollywood. That's the Hollywood version of things. I have seen that happen a couple of times. Some very interesting stories around that. But by and large, the membranes release and nothing happens. So there are three or four different acronyms that surround the release of membranes. So we have ROM, release of membranes. We have PROM, that's premature release of membranes. And that means that the membranes release, the water comes out, leaks out, whatever, maybe it gushes out, it depends on how it happens, prematurely. That means you're not in labor when that happens. You're just sitting there, no contractions, and the water breaks first thing. That's premature release of membranes. We also have preterm premature release of membranes. So that's when the membranes release before 37 weeks of gestation. So now we have a preterm baby. Technically, 37 weeks is a term baby. So if the water breaks before that, we have preterm premature release of membranes. Big, long word. And we really hope that people get closer to 37, 38, 39, 40 weeks when their water breaks. But of course, lots of different things can happen. We also hope that once the membranes release, that contractions begin. But sometimes they don't. And of course, there's stories of people whose membranes release much, much earlier than that. We're talking in the 20s weeks range. If we're at, 25, 26, 27 weeks, that's a whole different scenario that we're going to be talking about there with very premature babies and NICU time. But for this podcast, we're just talking about the release of membranes. Okay, second release of membranes is SROM. The S stands for spontaneous. So it just happens. Nobody does anything. It's just spontaneous release of membranes. Now, spontaneous could also be premature, right? When we have preterm or premature or both, they're spontaneous. Nobody goes in and releases a bag of fluids on a baby who's, before 37 weeks. They hardly do it after that either, to start labor. But spontaneous just means that it happened all on its own. Might happen in the middle of the night. It might happen while you're in the grocery store. It might happen while you're at work. That's the spontaneous part of SROM. And then we have AROM. And the A stands for artificial release of membranes. So this is not spontaneous, but this is a procedure. So a midwife or a doctor, nurses don't do this procedure. It's a very minor procedure as far as procedures go, but a midwife or a doctor has to do this. So there's something called an amnio hook kind of looks like a crochet hook, but with a little tiny sharp tooth on it. And they would go into the vaginal opening, up the cervix. So cervix has to be open to some extent, and they snag the bag, they call it. So they just release the membranes. They make a hole in the sac. The fluid comes out. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little bit. Depends on the position of the baby and the amount of amniotic fluid surrounding the baby. That's called AROM. So all of these ROMs, all of these releases of membranes can happen at different times and for different reasons. Now, as a doula, if I have a client who has SROM or PROM, so it's premature or it's spontaneous and we're not in contractions, sometimes I'm like, oh snap, here we go. I hope contractions start in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Interesting to know, when we're looking at out-of-hospital birth, one of the more common reasons to transfer to a birth facility, a hospital or something, is we've had release of membranes spontaneously or artificially even, for a certain period of time. And it's a long time. We're talking, nearly a day long to that 24-hour mark, and we're not getting much labor going on despite our efforts. And so when I have a client whose water breaks first, that could sometimes put a little kink in our plan or our trajectory of birth. There are things that you can do, and we'll talk about those in other episodes, to prompt contractions to begin. Sometimes we're deep into labor when we get SROM. Maybe you're 7-8 centimeters and the water just breaks. It happens often towards the end of labor because that increased pressure on the amniotic sac. Remember, that's just a balloon holding all this fluid and a baby in it. The increased pressure as the baby comes down in the later stages of labor sometimes will cause that spontaneous release of membranes. Sometimes it's a big pop and a gush. I've heard that pop many times. It's audible sometimes. The person who is experiencing it can definitely feel that pop. I've been splashed on before. I was at a birth just a couple weeks ago where it was an impressive release of membranes, and the mom was lying on the bed, and we had an adequate number of pads and towels under her, but this release of membranes exceeded all of that, and I got my knee pretty wet. And it was all spontaneous, and her baby was born 4 minutes later. So artificial release of membranes, that can be used as a tool of augmentation. So when we augment a labor, we do something to help it along. It's already in process and we push it for some reason. There's a lot of that goes on in hospitals. We do a lot of augmenting. A lot of times it's done with Pitocin. So we're trying to get contractions more strong, more consistent, closer together, whatever that might be, whatever the goal is. This is a tool of augmentation. And not everybody wants it. Some people want to avoid it. But I always like to talk about it like a card to keep in our back pocket, if you will. Play that card if you need to. So if your membranes are intact and are wanting to augment or assist labor in the process, depending on where you are, have a discussion with your healthcare provider about this, of course. It could be a good route to break that bag of waters and see if that baby will come down a little further and the contractions will respond. A lot of times that kicks it up into a little bit higher gear of labor when we do artificial release of membranes. So let's talk also in our culture about, and this is an interesting, kind of a sticky subject, about the practices around spontaneous or premature, not preterm, but premature release of membranes. If you were to have your water break, have the membranes release at some time, the hospital staff is going to want you to come in right away. They're just going to say, hurry up, get here. We got to do some stuff so that you get your baby going on. And some providers, however, will give you a little bit of time. So this is a discussion to have ahead of time. If my water breaks, if my membranes release, and I'm not having labor at that time, what's my time frame for going into the hospital? And most hospitals will say, well, you don't have a time frame. Get here now. Some providers, however, will look at you as your particular situation and say, you know what, let's give it a couple hours at home. Let's give it a couple hours of rest. I've heard 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. That's kind of the longest that I've heard, but typically it's on the shorter side of what your provider might be comfortable with. Granted, a lot of other factors go into this decision. So this isn't we make one decision for every person. It's different per scenario. So your group B strep status comes into that. Are you group B strep negative or positive? Like, do we need to start treating for group beta strep at some point during labor? That might change our time frame. Is this your first baby or is this your fourth baby? That could also change the time frame because things can. First babies are kind of slower. They take their time as the body's figuring out what to do. But subsequent births can go pretty fast after that. Like I said, I've seen very, very precipitous births after the water breaks. So we can't give the same answer to everyone for that, right? One of the risks when your membranes release is the risk of infection goes up. That's a true legitimate risk. When, the whole time this pregnancy, you're growing a baby inside and it's all sealed off in this amazing amniotic sac. And it has 2 layers to it, a chorion and an amnion. They're very, very thin. You can see through them, these membranes. You can see through them. Light shines through them. But they hold everything in the same place and hold it safe from any other microbes or germs that the world has to offer. So once that membrane is breached, risk of infection does go up. That's true. However, it doesn't go up immediately. And your risk of infection, if you live in a relatively clean environment, your home doesn't need to be perfect, but in your own microbiome and the home that you live in and the germs that you live in is the space where that risk is lowest. And in our hospital settings is where that risk for infection can be highest. So consider your situation and where you're more comfortable spending some time. I'm not saying all the time. Don't stay at home for endless hours. We need to use that time wisely. But consider when we address the real risks, the risk of infection could be very much higher in a hospital. A vaginal exam is one of the biggest culprits of introducing infection internally. Even a sterile glove is going to introduce outside bacteria deeper inside to that what was sterile before the membranes released uterus, where of course there's a baby in it. It generally takes a long time for infection to set in, hours. They can treat infection. Well, they'll watch for infection by watching the rate of the baby's heart rate. If it's creeping up over time, like many, many hours, they can watch the mom's temperature if that's creeping up over time. They also can treat it with antibiotics at a certain time. Sometimes it's 18 hours. I've seen babies born at 40, 44, and 48 hours after the membranes release with no signs of infection and no treatment. So again, it's very much a case-by-case basis. So talk to your provider about that. And perhaps if you're someone who's very against interventions, consider artificial release of membranes as an alternative maybe to other interventions to augment or move labor along. Maybe you're getting exhausted and you need to move things along. We got to be prepared that when we do that AROM, that we're going to turn a new corner of intensity. But we also can maybe have a baby sooner. And there is research out there that talks about how sooner, and it's not a ton sooner. It's not like we're moving it up by hours or anything in most cases. But I like that intervention versus Pitocin because when we look at augmentation, there's different ways. Like there's 2 different efforts. We have chemical efforts and mechanical efforts. So chemicals are pharmaceuticals, hormones that our own body puts off. So Pitocin is a synthetic hormone. Oxytocin, our own body puts off that hormone to help with labor, to drive labor really. And then mechanical efforts, that could be something, physically that's done to the cervix, whether it's a membrane sweep or a balloon cath, a Foley cath. But when we release the bag of waters, the chemicals in the fluid come past the cervix and can be that chemical effort. And the baby's head kind of loses that bubble or cushion in front of it and can descend lower in the cervix, being a mechanical effort, and come down and press a little bit more, give a little more pressure. And it's all your own chemicals and your own mechanics. Nothing on board is anything that's not your own body, which is kind of cool. So just to review, ROM is release or rupture of membranes. We've got PROM, SROM, AROM, and even preterm PROM, which is happening before 37 weeks. So that's something important to understand. Lots of different components to that. A surprising amount of strategy and navigating during labor processes. We never know what's going to happen. Every labor is different. So we want to be prepared with all the knowledge that we can. As your labor unfolds, you can make the very best decisions for you and know what all of your options are. Thanks for being with us today. This is Angie Rosier, your host at the Ordinary Doula podcast, hosted by Birth Learning. Pop on over to our website. We have free birth plan template available. It's fillable. You can have some suggestions on there and you can fill in what's important to you on our website. We'd also love to chat with you if you need a consult about your particular situation, wherever you are. We'd love to use our experience to help your experience be better. We also have childbirth and breastfeeding classes available for purchase on our website. We'll hope to see you here next time. And today, I hope you go out and do something amazing. Do something that inspires you. Look for inspiration and joy in our daily life and spread love and kindness in your world today. Thank you and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Ordinary Doula podcast with Angie Rosier, hosted by Birth Learning. Episode credits will be in the show notes. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many aspects of giving birth.